By its 21st release, Global Underground had established itself as the definitive underground dance music mix album series. But GU kept pushing forward. Located in Moscow, GU25 would feature the series' first duo, Deep Dish, made up of DJs Sharam and Dubfire. The mix was the climax of a rapid rise for Deep Dish. In 1993, they were championed by Danny Tenaglia and New York's groundbreaking Tribal label. In 1995, their remix of DeLacy's Hideaway had dropped on dance floors across the world. 1998 saw Deep Dish drop their first album, and the duo were elevated to the worldwide stage. And Deep Dish would produce remixes for the likes of Michael Jackson, the Rolling Stones, and Madonna. Released in 2001, Global Underground 21 would be a great success. Phillips describes the mix as high-tech, deeply soulful, and grooving in any directions. They were going the right direction, winning a Grammy for their remix of Dido's Thank You, one of the most memorable selections from the entire GU series. 2 years later, Deep Dish would get the GU call again, but where would they follow up their legendary first entry? The duo would be the first to bring Global Underground to Canada, and GU25 would be set in Toronto. The actual event that would inspire the mix album would be hosted at the Government, a superclub that helped transform Toronto into a global clubbing destination. Toronto was on the global stage, but what was the history of Toronto's club scene? Pre-existing Toronto's entertainment district, Twilight Zone was house music's first home in Toronto. The club was owned by brothers David, Albert, Tony, and Michael Sassouni, created in the spirit of the Paradise Garage in New York and the Warehouse in Chicago. Many of the DJs were from New York, including Frankie Knuckles, David Morales, and Dave Madness Del Duval. The crowd was a mix of gay and straight clubbers, and the music was an eclectic mix of house music, hip-hop, freestyle, new wave, and disco that transformed the nightlife of the city and would go on to be the centerpiece of Toronto's entertainment district. The club would operate from 1981 to 1989, building the foundation for the future of the dance music underground in Toronto. Carrying the torch was RPM, responsible for bringing club music to younger crowds in Toronto. Resident DJ and soon-to-be superstar Chris Shepherd set up an all-ages Saturday night party, and the club would broadcast live to CFNY on television. The club brought in acts of all kinds, ranging from Chris Shepherd to the Beastie Boys to the Ramones to the Rolling Stones, but is also remembered for owner Murray Ball's constantly changing decor and elevated DJ booth. Created in 1996, Industry Nightclub is responsible for establishing a mature clubbing scene that, along the way in its brief 4 years, would put Toronto on the map of the international house music scene. Just as Twilight Zone was inspired by the Paradise Garage and the Warehouse, Industry drew inspiration from and made strong bonds with DJs from Chicago, Detroit, and New York, notably Danny Tenaglia, Kashmir, aka Green Velvet, and Derek Carter, who would play Industry a record 17 times. Industry's trademark was its mixed dance floor, the dance club that brought the gay, straight, and rave scenes together under one roof. While the roster of visiting DJs was world-class, the local crowd were loyal to Industry's residents Matt Castleman, aka Matt C, and Kenny Glasgow. Daft Punk, Basement Jaxx, Paul Oakenfold, Paul Van Dyke, Ronnie Size, and Fatboy Slim all had their Canadian club debuts at Industry. When Industry closed, the Government carried the torch. The Government was formerly the Club RPM and owned by Charles Carbuth. The Government set out to be Toronto's first superclub, hosting 5 different rooms, hydraulic trussing, an elevated DJ booth, and raised dance floor. The Government boasted a sound system designed by Stephen Dash that would give the club a top-rated recommendation, with some of the world's biggest DJs. Mark Oliver was the resident DJ playing the main room every single Saturday for the club's first 5 years. Oliver shares with Denise Benson. For the first few years, the guests were coming in. Guys like Sasha and John Digweed would say, "This is the best club in the world." It had that reputation. When Global Underground came to Toronto, it was Government who would host Deep Dish for the event that would inspire the GU25 mix. Sharam shares with Dom Phillips, "Government is one of the best clubs in the world. It's one of the biggest ones for sure." Dubfire adds, "That night, the club had the right vibe." The live set that inspired the Global Underground mix would be played in front of 6,000 in the Government, and the highlight of the night was when clubbers unfurled a banner that read "Tune" over the dance floor. The mix. The burgeoning Canadian scene and an unstoppable Deep Dish come face to face on Global Underground 25. Specific selections highlight the local production skill in Canada. We felt that Canada had been neglected for a long time. There's been a resurgence of Canadian producers: Luke Fair, Sultan, Tone Depth, Max Graham. These guys are doing some amazing stuff. Sultan, real name Osama Al-Sarraf, lived in Kuwait, Cyprus and Egypt before moving to Montreal in 1996. He was based in Montreal when GU21 in Moscow was released, and the mix left a big impression. Sultan would get to know Dubfire and Sharam during Deep Dish appearances on the Big DJ, small club promotion throughout Canada, an event series that saw some of England's biggest DJs flying overseas to play in a local club in various Canadian series. On a Yoshitoshi release, there was an email address, and Sultan sent over some productions he'd been working on. Sharam responded enthusiastically, and to Sultan's disbelief, Sharam not only wanted to sign all of his tracks, but 3 of his productions would be featured on Deep Dish's upcoming GU album in Toronto. Deep Dish's sound always brings an authentic soulfulness, and for CD1, Deep Dish find that soul in Sultan's Middle Eastern soundscapes with 3 tracks. Night Visions by Sultan featuring Stephanie Vecina, Sultan and the Greeks' Resin Samio Into Black a cappella, and Sultan and the Greeks' remix of Valentino's Flying. Complementing Disc 1, Disc 2 shows the other side of Deep Dish. Disc 2 is an energetic mix that wastes no time with Situation 2's bouncing intro track Way Too Tight. Other highlights include Eliza, Time, Planet Funk Mix, Maurice and Noble's Hoochie Coochie, and Holden and Thompson, Nothing, 93 returning mix. GU25 would include bonus after-club mixes by Sharam and Dubfire, showcasing their individual styles and sound. Dubfire's mix, deeper and funkier like CD1, with Sharam's mix more energetic and progressive like CD2. A lot of listeners like to designate GU25 as Deep Dish's final contribution to the series as a duo, and the after-club mixes as the start of their solo efforts, highlighted by Sharam's GU29 in Dubai and Dubfire's GU31 in Taipei. But that's not necessarily the case. In a future interview with Resident Advisor in 2006, Sharam shares that we've always been separate producers and separate DJs who have just collaborated together for all these years. As stated in prior episodes, music is a personal experience for both the listeners and the DJ or producer creating the music. Rather than look at the differences between Dubfire and Sharam's musical taste and style as reasons they eventually went their separate ways, it's better to understand these differences as a balance that gives Deep Dish their irreplaceable edge and what made their mixes like Global Underground 25 so great.